And here's a big thing, you guys. So you hear me and Brittany tell parts of our story, participants in our trauma and the things that we went through. You ain't heard the full story till you read the One Step Deeper journal. And the way we created this, I thought, should we put our stories up front? Because this was what you and I talked about. Should we put it up front? Should we put it? And I said, we're going to break it up into 4 different sections of 10. The first 10 being kind of soft, going to get them in there, then a little harder, and then full bore at the last 10 entries. Why don't we do the same thing with our story? Start softly with the story. And then as the book progresses, add a little more of the story, and then both of us shared the worst part of our trauma in that final section. And I thought it turned out well.
I love the way that turned out. And for anybody who gets the book, which you should, and reads it, my story is not in chronological order because the worst of the worst happened before. And so my story is kind of like all over the place. I feel like you can follow it the way that it was written, but I love that, section 1, I kind of talk about the trauma that happened with my mom and multiple sclerosis and her diagnosis and what that meant for me. And then part 2 was like talking about my stepmom and my dad and what happened there. And then we go into just my dad, because you guys have listened to the podcast, I have had a whole thing with just my dad. And then the very last part was the story of the stepdad. And just, if you do read that, and I think I gave enough warning as you're starting to read that story that I do tell some very intimate details, not even all the details of that, but it gets really, it's some tough stuff. And I love the idea that you had to pull them apart, because reading the entirety of my story and then the entirety of Jimmy's story before you even start day 1, it's a lot to take in. And so the way that we did, here's a little bit, here's a little taste, here's a, and then just gradually. And so by the time you've been working on yourself through the journal entries, you're also more open to hearing the deeper parts of our story. And so I loved how that worked out.
Yes. And so we break it up. So you see Brittany's story part 2. And so it kind of reads, and both of us are very narrative driven in the way that we write. And so, and you're a great storyteller yourself, and so you'll see our respective stories, and we tell the story. What's funny is your story had a lot more intricacy, so there are a little bit longer sections with Brittany in that, but I was cool with that. Look, I've been online for over a decade and a half. A lot of people know a lot about me. They don't know a lot about you, Brittany. So I was really happy that we were able to kind of get your story, your name out there a little bit. I think people are gonna, I think people that listen and watch our show, they already know both of our hearts and know us pretty well. But the casual person that doesn't know who you are, they're going to go, whoa, how is that girl at 29 still standing?
Honestly, I did that. As I was writing it, I've gotten not numb, but just so comfortable telling my story that I have to watch other people's reactions. And like, as I'm telling and like being so open, and they're just like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that was bad. That happened. Like, I've gotten to that point. But like, when I was writing this, I had a really dark time. I wrote all the entries first, and then I went back into telling the story. And when it was time to write the part about my stepdad, like, I hit dark, because in order to write the story, you have to relive it. You have to go back to it. And so, and by the way, I unloaded that story, and the story that Jimmy originally got to read. Honestly, Jimmy, I'm sorry you had to read that. But obviously all that, the really just getting it out was edited. It's still the story, but like all the ugly, nasty.
Well, I don't. We have other books we want to write, including the follow-up that will be coming next in this One Step Journal
right.
Trauma. We'll put some of that heavy stuff in there.
Yes. It was heavy as it was, much less like telling every intricate detail. I think when I very first wrote it, it was something like 20 pages so we had to cut that.
And it was very graphic. She's like, is it okay if I say this word? I'm like, you don't really need to say that word, because I think people will extrapolate what happened to you.
Yeah, so it all got edited, but like as I was writing that version, and then it was time to like edit it out, I just read it from a different place than writing it, and I was so broken for myself that, wow, girl, it was like, it's such a bittersweet moment. And maybe you did this too. Like, you're writing your story that you've told over and over and over again. You've almost gone numb to telling the story. And as you're reading it, you're like, shit, I've been through some stuff.
Well, there was some days that you called me and the heaviness of it weighed on you so much. I remember we would talk through those times. It's like, Brittany, this is who we're trying to reach with this book. This is why this book is needed, because if you're feeling that as an author, if you're feeling that as somebody who has worked on this stuff on a personal growth journey, how about all those people out there who they don't work on themselves and they still feel the heaviness of that on a daily basis? And that encouraged you in the midst of it. I remember like us talking about that yes, you're putting yourself out there to speak on behalf of all those people who don't have the strength or the voice to speak up.
Yeah. And I will say, for the people who haven't, I don't want to say courage, because it doesn't make you weak to not share your story, because sharing your story is very difficult. Even if you're just sharing it with someone that you actually trust. But like Jimmy and I telling our stories, and I'm speaking on your behalf, I hope that when you read our story, that you see that you have permission to tell yours. Yes. And that our stories are tough and they're hard to read and take in, but you have a story too. If you listen to our podcast and you're here on episode 65, you've dealt with trauma on some level. You've dealt with something. And so as you read our stories, and I know you listen to them on the podcast, but when you read them, I want you to have full permission, full whatever. If you don't need our permission, but just like, and also, the more I tell my story and the more Jimmy tells his story, the more freeing it is. The more open I become.
Psst, come here. I got to tell you about this kit. It is a hair mineral analysis kit to determine your deficiencies in key minerals. It'll also show you your toxicity with heavy metals. It'll show hormones, your immune system, your thyroid, your adrenals, and your metabolism, all in one kit. And all you got to do is go to upgradedformulas.com, use the coupon code Jimmy. You'll get 15% off this kit, but they have everything that you need to just basically give them a piece of your hair, and they'll show you how to do that. And then you mail it in and they'll show you specifically where you have deficiencies. And then go to upgradedformulas.com. They have a full array of nanotechnology that will help you shore up those deficiencies in the minerals. So again, upgradedformulas.com, and check it out. Test, don't guess.
Something that happened, and you'll read more about it, about the stepdad, is I wasn't given the justice that I desired at that time. And so being able to tell my story to the people who said ugly things about me, the people who told lies about me, the people who didn't let me have the justice that I deserved at that time, me being able to tell my story, I was like, this is the justice that I get to give to myself. I have chills. I get to give myself what I wanted as a kid. I didn't get to tell my story in a courtroom. I didn't get to do that. People told ugly lies about me, and I got to get it out. And so I got to tell my story, and it feels so damn good to be able to do that.
And along those lines, I want to hear this from you. I kind of know the answer, but they know you have a book. The key players in this, they know that this book here, and like your dad has seen it. Yeah, it looks like a book. Your stepmom loves it. Kind of read through it and loves it. And so different people, players in the story, and your old stepmom, who you talk about in the book as well, and she was concerned. Anyway, what's been the overall mood of the book? Obviously, it's mixed because some people don't like that you're talking about this kind of stuff, Britt. You're supposed to keep your mouth quiet about some things because the last name is more important than the first name, Brittany. You're not supposed to defile the last name when, okay, well, that was so long ago. All the things that we've talked about a lot on this show. You don't just get over your trauma. So what's been the mood since you brought this up? I got to hear this.
Yeah. So it's been overwhelming to watch the reactions, but I will say that watching the reactions of the people who are and have made their way into the book, it's given me information that I needed. Their reactions gave me the information that I needed.
Yes.
It's been not easy, but easier to break connections that I thought that I needed in my life based off of their reaction to me writing this.
Yeah.
So I was expecting my dad to just not take it well, like just not.
Yeah.
And instead, my dad has literally been my biggest cheerleader, like literally.
And he's got a whole section about him that doesn't paint him in section 3 in too positive of a light. In this section, I want to focus on the complex story of my tumultuous relationship with my biological father, Michael, for most of my life. After having him sporadically in my lifetime, I lived with him at 16. Things have been strained, to say the least. And then you go on to tell the rest of the story. But it's like he could be reading those words and go, Brittany, why you got to make me look bad like that? But he knows he has a great relationship with you now, so it's wonderful. Meanwhile, you have other relationships in your life with some of the players in your story that you're not as very close with, and so they're going to take offense, which is all the more reason why Brittany's story needed to get out there.
Well, and I won't name names of who exactly, has had certain reactions because I'm not that person, but it was really sad to watch some people freak out that hadn't read it, which, by the way, Dad hasn't read it. He just kept telling me, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you. He's like, I'm not gonna read it. I'll buy it, I'll get you to sign it, but I ain't gonna read it. I don't read. That's my dad, which is fine with me. But I had other people just not interested at all, like won't let me speak about it, won't let me talk about it, like no congratulations, you wrote a book, no anything like that. I've had certain family members that lumped me together that because at one time I identified as Christian, that this book must be written in that tone, and it's not. It's definitely not.
We got a lot of F-bombs in there. Just kind of warn you ahead of time.
There's a whole page that says pretty much nothing but F-bombs, and I wrote it, and it felt great. But yeah, and expressing that to those family members that this is not a book for you to read. I literally have told several family members, this is not a book for you to read. You're not going to like it. You're not going to want to read it. So don't. And it won't hurt my feelings that you don't read it, because I don't want to hear your negative review of my book through your perspective, because it's not for you. And then I've had family members like, oh my gosh, what did you write? I'm so scared. What do you write about me? And I'm like, who do you think I am? I'm like, I'm not trying to like, I drug one person in my book. I drug him through the mud, but he deserves it. And that was my abuser. That was my sexual abuser. I drug him. I told every secret, every story I told a lot of it. I didn't tell every bit of it.
Enough of the story that people will get the gist of it.
Yes. And for the people in my life who know who he is, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry that it's out there. I don't even know if I ever said his name, but people who know me know who it is. No. I didn't.
So Brittany, do you still have that manuscript that you read and all of that? Oh, no way. You got it right there with you. That's funny. Yep, there it is. See, that's going to go into the Smithsonian Institute of how famous you are someday.
But can you imagine all of these pages? I read all of this in less than 24 hours.
Good.
And marked it up. I was trying to see if I can find one of those pages that there was just like, what is happening on this page? There's so many, but oh man, let's see. Oops. Anyway, he said I highlighted it and marked it up, and yes.
Well, and it was great because you caught different things that way. And this was before Jimmy got his hands on it. I'm like, I want Brittany, I want you to scour it because you need this experience of editing your own manuscript. And you did great. Now, you didn't catch everything. You caught a lot of things, but you didn't catch everything. But then I read it, reread it. So you saw my process. Like, yours was 24 hours. I did a week and a half, 2 weeks, where I literally would read the whole book, go back to the beginning. And I would literally read it out loud at some point just to make sure it read properly. Because sometimes your brain will overlook words as you're editing. But you did very well. You did very, very well.
Yeah.